Well, Happy New Year. To me, the beginning of the new year is inconsequential in so many ways. Depending on what culture you're from or what calendar you're using, the year begins at completely different times. We are celebrating the Gregorian New Year in a few days on January 1st, but the New Year for the Christian liturgical calendar was at the beginning of the season of Advent. And the Jewish New Year was on September 19th. The Lunar New Year will be on January 25th. The Islamic New Year was September 1st. For teachers and kids, their New Year starts in late August or early September, depending on their school district. And for most people, or literally everyone I've ever met, we count our years not from January 1st, but from the anniversary of our birth. So if we want to be literal about this New Year thing, we should each be celebrating it on our birthday, because that makes the most sense. But I digress. The fact that January 1st is a rather inconsequential date to many of us does not minimize the significance it can hold, and it does not devalue the use that we can get from it. And for many, the start of a new year is a time to make resolutions and to reflect on the past. And in our modern world, this process of reflecting and setting goals is being aided in some pretty cool ways. If you have Spotify, they give you a playlist of your most listened to songs for the past year. If you have Snapchat, they send you a video of all of the pictures and videos you've saved and sent in the past year. And I love that technology can help us in remembering and reminiscing in ways that we haven't ever been able to before. Because these are tools that can help us to reconnect our thoughts and our minds to moments of the past. That connection we have with them is so strong, and being given reminders of music and of photos triggers that inside of us. And when it comes to looking forward, there are just as many, if not more, tools at our disposal to help reinforce any of the changes we want to make. We can download apps on our phones to log our food and stay healthy, to track our workouts. We can do yoga in our living room by streaming a video. We can get a virtual plant that we water each time we drink water ourselves. And we can text with a therapist or call a helpline if we're going through a hard time and don't know what to do or what steps will help us move forward. And all of these things are wonderful. But as I started to think about them, about tools we have for reflecting and goal setting, it made me realize I have absolutely no idea why we do this. Whose idea was it to set a New Year's resolution? So I Googled it, and according to the History Channel, the first people we know of to have done this were the ancient Babylonians. At the beginning of the year, they reaffirmed their loyalty to their king, and they made promises to the gods to pay their debts and return any objects they had borrowed. And then in ancient Rome, Julius Caesar was the one who made January 1st the beginning of the new year. And he did it because the month of January is named for the god Janus, who inhabited doorways and arches and had two faces. They were symbolic of looking forward into the future and backward into the past at the same time. So Romans offered sacrifices to Janus, and promised good conduct for the coming of the new year. So it seems that it's almost something inherent in our humanity to want to change and want to grow. And New Year's offers us a set date and time where we can point to and say, this is when I'm going to start. But originally, these New Year resolutions were about making promises to the gods. I think we should go back to that way of thinking about them. And most people's New Year's resolutions are about improving themselves in some way, and that takes some degree of self-reflection and contemplation to come up with. So in that sense, they could definitely be considered a spiritual practice, albeit unintentionally and not consciously. But in my book, honest self-reflection and striving to be a better person counts as spiritual growth. And people can use whatever language they want to describe it, religious or otherwise, but that doesn't change what it actually is. But what I see as the major difference between the common secular self-improvement type goal and the intentionally spiritual resolution is an added level of consciousness that comes with the connection to something larger than oneself. So I want to think about failing at our New Year's resolutions. A very high percentage of people self-report that they did not successfully achieve what they had set out to at the new year. And I think it's because we have lost touch with this notion that our New Year's resolution should be a promise to God. It may seem like a trivial distinction, but I think that there is an increased sense of accountability when we make a promise to another person, especially to someone else we are close with, someone we care about. That relationship, the bond that we have with that person helps us to keep our priorities clear, and we make more of a conscious effort to do right by that other person. And when we do this, it's no longer a self-centered act when it's a promise to someone else. And when we make promises to God, it's going to be a change we're making in our lives because it is what is consistent with what is good and true, with love and wisdom. And it is something that will bring us closer to God. And that type of change is not surface level. By definition, it can't be. Because genuine change comes from changing our feelings and our thoughts in addition to our outer actions. And that's what it means to be made new. And being made new is exactly the promise that the Lord made to us in Revelation 21. The promise of a new heaven and a new earth is a promise of a new way of life. And this promise of newness exists not only for us on an individual spiritual level, but to us as humankind altogether. And this is kind of the ultimate gift that we receive from the Lord, which is great. But we have to be the ones to ask for it. We have to ask for help from the Lord to become a more thoughtful, a more compassionate, a more loving person. And it is through that, through each one of us working to become a better person, that we all collectively experience this new heaven and new earth. But it can't happen without each one of us as individuals and it cannot happen without all of us as a collective. In True Christianity 775, we read, "What is true of the individual as a church is also true of the human collective or aggregate known as the church. The church is a human collective or aggregate that is made up of many individuals. The human individual is the church as it exists within each of the many people who constitute it. The divine design always includes overall systems and individual components. Everything that exists has both of these elements. Without the overall systems, the individual components would not take shape or be able to sustain continued existence, just as the individual parts of the body could not exist without belonging to some broader system within it. These interconnected, interdependent relationships between the micro and the macro, the individual and the human collective, are vital to our success in all that we do. If we think and act only for ourselves or only for a specific group of people, we are suffocating that living connection, and we are self-sabotaging our own happiness. We must acknowledge not only the reality of this interdependence with one another, but also the incredible responsibility of that reality. And I think one very successful way of doing that is putting God at the center of what we say and do. We must think spiritually and not materially, because when we do, we will realize that we are among the angels. In this very moment, on this very day, we are among the angels. And the way that I say it makes it sound so easy, but it's not. If it were, everyone would already have done it. It's hard, and we're going to fail, probably a lot. But that's the whole reason that we're here on this earth, so hopefully we can make some time for it. At one point when Swedenborg is describing this process of opening ourselves up toward heaven, at the end of one of his paragraphs he writes, "Which is possible only in the course of many years. Therefore, anyone who believes that a person can be made new in a moment is very much mistaken." So yes, it isn't going to happen immediately, and it's probably not going to happen this year. But this start of a new year is a good opportunity for each of us to be intentional about taking our next step on this journey. And I do have some good news for those who are hung up on the fact that they're going to fail and it's going to take a long time. You are only half the equation, and luckily, God is the other half. God's side of this promise is always there, no matter what. And that's what we are striving for, to keep asking, to keep ourselves open to God's presence and guidance, to help us to access it, to figure out how to do better, how to be better. Swedenborg has an interesting note on the topic of being made new. In Arcana Celestia we read, "This is the reason why a person is regenerated, that is, made new, by means of temptations, or what amounts to the same by means of spiritual conflicts, and after that receives an inward disposition different than before. That is to say, becomes gentle, humble, single-minded, and contrite at heart. From these considerations, one may now see the use served by temptations, which is that good from the Lord may not only flow in, but also render the vessels subservient and so join itself to them. The good from the Lord not only flows in, but joins itself to them. That is what being made new looks like, and that is what we are striving for. So as you think about what you are going to make as your resolution for this new year, think about what you want to promise God. What part of yourself do you want to focus on to become more compassionate, more useful, more loving? What will bring you closer to God? Whatever it is that you come up with, God has already made the promise to you and is waiting to show you the way. Amen.